Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Eruvin, pages 91 to 97, Tzadi Aleph through Tzadi Zayin. 91. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Maaseh b'shat hasakana, vayu malin sefer Torah mechatzer lagag megag lechatzer mechatzer lekarpef likrot bo. There was an incident involving a time of danger when we needed a Torah scroll. And the Torah scroll was not in the synagogue. We had to carry it to the synagogue by way of the outdoor space of a chatzer, the outdoor space of a rooftop, and of a karpef, of an enclosed non-residential area. And yet, we did all those things and we were able to read from the Torah. The implication is that all three of these types of areas are considered one domain for items that began Shabbos rest outside, and that there's no hesitation in carrying from one to the other. Amrulo, they said to him, Ein shata sakana raya. The time of danger proves nothing, meaning we might have relaxed the halachic standards in times of physical danger and crisis that would not hold true under ordinary circumstances. 92. Yisha b'gdola v'get b'ktana mitgareshet. So the topic at hand is when there's a large courtyard which opens up into a smaller courtyard. The larger one has a perfunctory fourth wall, whereas the smaller one does not. And the conclusion of the Gemara is that the smaller one is an adjunct to the larger one, but the larger one is not an adjunct to the smaller one. And so, in the case of a woman who needs to receive her bill of divorce, her get document, she needs to have possession of it. If it's in the same courtyard that she has possession of it. So, if she is in the large one and the document is in the smaller one, she is divorced. By contrast, if she is in the small courtyard and the document is in the large courtyard, she is not divorced. Enamit gareshet. Another example of this phenomenon, the synagogue, where there is a minyan of people and there's a chazan, a shliach tzibur. If the community is in the larger courtyard and the chazan is in the smaller one, yotzini dei chovatan, everyone fulfills their liturgical obligation. But if the community was in the small courtyard and the chazan was in the large one, in yotzin, they do not fulfill their obligation. 93. The Gemara had a question about the status of a partition. We know it has to be 10 tfachim high, 10 handbreadths high, in order for it to be valid and recognized. But what about if it's 5 tfachim of man-made partition and 5 tfachim of naturally occurring elevation, or some other permutation? Does 5 plus 5 equal 10, or not? Must it be the case that the entire partition of the full 10 is either man-made or naturally occurring elevation? So this was a machloket, vehilchata, and the conclusion is, gidud chamisha mechitza chamisha, that 5 plus 5, mitzdarfin, they add up to 10, and it is considered a recognizable mechitza. 94. Rabbi sheberu derech la'atzman. What happens if the public at large chooses for themselves a path to tread through private property? Masheberu beru. What they chose for themselves counts. It is halachic standing, and the owner of the private property cannot prevent the public from traversing that area on that path. The Gemara says, Ini, is this really true? And responds in the name of Rav Gidol Marav, V'hu she'avdal hem derech botot sadeh. It's only true if there previously had been a path through this private property, but that path was lost. It's no longer recognizable. We're not sure whether it was on the north side or the south side. And now that the public wants to regain access, they have chosen the new spot through the property. The owner cannot object. 95. What happens if you find tefillin exposed out in the wilderness somewhere, in an unenclosed area, in a non-eruved area? How do you rescue the tefillin from being in a state of disgrace? Rabbi Gamliel says you bring in 2 pairs of tefillin at a time. So what does Rabbi Gamliel actually hold? If he were to hold that Shabbat is an appropriate time for wearing tefillin, then it would only be possible to wear 1 pair of tefillin and not 2, because it would be bal tosif, a violation of adding to the Torah, to wear 2 pairs of tefillin at a time in a moment when there is a mitzvah in play. And if Rabbi Gamliel holds that Shabbat is not a time for tefillin, then it should be permissible to rescue even more than 2 pairs of tefillin, because as long as you wear it in a fashion of an article of clothing, then the sages allowed you to rescue tefillin in that manner. So the Gemara concludes it must be that Rabbi Gamliel held that Shabbat is not a time for tefillin. And so rescuing tefillin is allowed derech malbush, as a matter of an article of clothing. It's just that it only works if you wear the item of tefillin in the spot on the body where you normally would wear tefillin. To that the Gemara responds, well, if that's true, then only 1 pair of tefillin should be possible at any one time, not 2. And to this the Gemara responds, well, in fact, there is a space available on the spot on the arm and on the head where tefillin goes to fit 2 boxes. And so Rabbi Gamliel says you could save 2 pairs of tefillin at one time. 96. Rabbi Akiva said, you might have thought that it's appropriate to wear tefillin on Shabbat and holidays. Talmud Lomar, therefore the Torah tells us, that you shall wear a sign on your arm. That only on those days when it is necessary to have an additional sign of the covenant between God and Israel on your physical person must you wear tefillin, as opposed to those days which are gufan oath, which are in and of themselves signs of the covenant, like Shabbat and holidays. On those days, it is unnecessary and therefore inappropriate to wear another sign of the covenant, namely tefillin. 97. In a time of danger, what do you do to spare the tefillin the indignity of being left out in the yonder? You cover them with some kind of cloth, an article of clothing, and then you walk away and come back after Shabbat and save them then. But the Braita says, you should save the tefillin by bringing them back into civilization, but carrying them less than 4 cubits at a time, and thus not being in technical violation of the laws of carrying. So, how do we reconcile these 2 different theories of covering the tefillin versus carrying them for less than 4 amot at a time? Rav says, kan b'sakanat nachri, kan b'sakanat listim. There's a difference between a danger posed by bandits and a danger posed by heathens, by Gentiles. In the case of the danger posed by Gentiles, you should cover the tefillin, walk away, and come back later. In the case of danger posed by listim, by bandits, what should you do? You should carry them less than 4 cubits at a time and bring them back to civilization. Everyone have a great week.